Welcome to This Explainer. If you've ever found yourself standing in a crowded room, totally surrounded by people, yet feeling completely and utterly isolated, well, you are definitely not alone. It's a very specific kind of loneliness, right? A sort of intellectual isolation. So today we're going to explore exactly why deep thinkers often struggle to make friends. We'll trace that whole journey, from the very real pain of feeling misunderstood, all the way to some highly actionable research-backed solutions. If you're someone who craves depth in a world that, let's be honest, often settles for surface-level chatter, this explainer is absolutely for you.
So why do deep thinkers feel so alone? It's a question that honestly catches a lot of us off guard as we get older. Just think about it for a second. When we're growing up, we kind of just assume that being thoughtful and kind and curious will naturally act like a magnet for deep connections. We think our desire for nuance is just going to automatically attract like-minded friends. But then, adulthood hits, and we realize the social landscape is actually quite different. We find ourselves yearning for these really substantive conversations, while everyone else just seems perfectly content discussing the weather.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to really understand what's happening, we have to look at this powerful quote from essayist Karin Paul. He says, "You're just mentally alive in a world that's emotionally asleep." Doesn't that just perfectly validate that feeling of total exhaustion? It's the sheer fatigue of constantly having to shrink your thoughts down so you don't overwhelm other people. You offer this nuanced perspective and boom, it gets flattened into a quick joke or an emoji. So you learn to live in two worlds. You've got your expansive inner world and an outer world where you basically just perform simplicity, just to make sure you fit in. What we're really talking about here is intellectual loneliness. And to be clear, this isn't about lacking social skills or just being antisocial. No, it is the distinct, very real pain of being fundamentally misunderstood and not being able to bring your full mind to the table. See, deep thinkers crave spaces where complexity isn't treated as a burden. They want to sit with a complicated thought that doesn't have an immediate, easy conclusion. And they want to do that without being labeled as overthinking or intense or just, too much.
And hey, if you think this is just a matter of having a bad attitude, check out this stat. Research shows that a whopping 82% of high IQ individuals report feeling emotionally drained by small talk. Now compare that to just 38% of the general population. That is a massive difference. This is a neurological reality. It's not arrogance, and it's certainly not a conscious choice to be difficult. Highly intelligent brains are quite literally wired to constantly seek patterns and meaning and intellectual acceleration. So when they're forced to idle in the slow traffic of small talk, they experience real cognitive dissonance. It literally drains their mental energy.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this turns our standard assumptions completely upside down. A study from the Singapore Management University found a truly fascinating contrast. For the general population, life satisfaction tends to go up the more frequently they socialize with friends. Makes sense, right? But for highly intelligent individuals, the exact opposite is often true. They reportedly feel less satisfied with their lives the more they socialize with friends. They simply don't need constant, casual social contact to be happy. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they are much better adapted to finding deep meaning through solitary pursuits.
Section 1. The perception penalty and our social assumptions.
So, if socializing can be such a huge drain, how are deep thinkers perceived by the rest of the world when they actually do try to engage? Well, unfortunately, society often operates on a heavy cultural stereotype. Think of what we might call the Sheldon Cooper archetype. Popularized by TV shows like The Big Bang Theory. It's this widespread idea that high specific intelligence is just automatically paired with low social capability. Pop culture loves to show us that someone can be a total genius in theoretical physics, but completely incapable of navigating basic human emotions or casual interactions. And while, sure, it makes for good comedy, it strongly reinforces the assumption that a high intellect comes with a built-in social penalty. And the research brilliantly illustrates this exact bias. Based on studies into the social perceptions of the highly intelligent, society often just assumes that intellectual gifts come at the direct expense of street smarts. When people perceive someone as having higher than normal intelligence, they actually often rate them as less likable right off the bat. It's almost as if just appearing highly intelligent creates this immediate, unconscious barrier to friendship. It acts as a poor first impression, completely regardless of the person's actual social skills. But what specific behaviors actually trigger this perception penalty and lower that initial likableness? Well, research points to a few main culprits. First up is off-target verbosity. This is basically when someone stays way too narrowly focused on minute details or goes off on wild tangents and entirely loses the listener. Then there's the use of complex vocabulary. Speaking in a way that feels intimidating or even condescending to others can instantly alienate people. Add in a genuine lack of free time, usually due to intense educational or career pursuits, and a tendency towards self-imposed isolation because they only want to interact with equally educated peers, and, well, you have a clear recipe for social disconnection.
Section 2. Giftedness and neurodivergence and their intersecting challenges. Let's see how this all builds, because these challenges certainly don't exist in a vacuum. For many people, social struggles are compounded by asynchronous development, which essentially means their intellectual and emotional speeds just don't match up. When someone is both gifted and neurodivergent, they're often referred to as twice exceptional, or 2E. Let's contrast how these social struggles actually manifest in adults. For someone who is gifted and has ADHD, the challenges might look like impulsivity in conversations or intensely dominating a discussion about a deep interest, paired with a really severe sensitivity to rejection. On the flip side, for someone who is gifted and autistic, the struggles might center more around unique perspectives on social norms and extreme discomfort with small talk, sensory sensitivities, and the absolute exhaustion of masking, constantly adapting their behavior just to fit societal expectations.
Let's look a little closer at the ADHD side of the equation for a moment. Research shows that core ADHD symptoms can actively inhibit intimacy and cause peer rejection. The challenges here include inattention to social cues, like missing the fluidity and subtle shifts of a natural conversation. Then there's impulsive group entry, like joining a discussion abruptly or totally off topic. And of course, emotion dysregulation, which means reacting entirely out of context. Sadly, this often leads to what researchers call unreciprocated friendship nominations. That's a heartbreaking situation where the individual feels a really close bond that the other person simply doesn't share.
Section 3. Bridging the gap and finding your tribe.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time on the problem so far. The isolation, the draining small talk, the perception penalties, the neurocognitive hurdles. So, how do we actually fix this isolation? Well, the crucial point is this quote: "Small talk is the bridge to getting to know people and figure out if they're like-minded." Now, I know. Small talk is the enemy, right? We all share that collective sigh of dread when someone asks, "So, how was your weekend?" But we really have to reframe it. Small talk isn't just fake, shallow fluff. It is a necessary, functional signal of friendliness. When someone asks about your weekend, they aren't demanding that deep analysis of your time. They're signaling, "Hey, I am friendly and I am open to talking with you." It's basically the required warm-up before the main event.
So here is a 3-step blueprint for actually navigating this. Step 1, accept small talk as a warm-up. Don't fight it. Use it to establish basic rapport. Step 2, seek specific interest groups. General meet and greets are highly inefficient for deep thinkers. You need to go where the deep dives are already happening. And Step 3, pivot to personal conversation. Once you've warmed up, use curiosity-driven questions. If they mention a hobby, ask what specifically draws them to it. You are gently steering the conversation from casual chatter to substantive depth, just to see if they follow your lead.
Let's get even more concrete with some actionable strategies you can literally use today. First, join niche online communities. Today's forums and subreddits are incredibly powerful tools for finding highly specific shared interests. Second, if you can't find a local group that matches your depth, just start your own. Tell people you're starting a weekly philosophy meetup, or maybe a book club focused on complex ideas. Finally, when you do have a great interaction, use your shared passion as an excuse to ask for their contact info. Just say something like, "Hey, it was great talking about Foucault with you. We should totally grab coffee and continue this. What's your number?" Seriously, you have the power to curate your own circle.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought from our sources. Are you ready to ask, who are you becoming? The world right now is loud, it's fast, and yes, it is often incredibly shallow. But you don't have to shrink yourself to fit into it. Remember, one real, substantive conversation of depth is worth a lifetime of superficial social approval. The quiet, deep thinkers aren't gone, they're just waiting for each other out there. So don't be afraid to lead with depth when the time is right.